Hi friends, welcome to my channel. In today's video, I'm going to talk about dynamic SQL in SQL Server. This is the sixth video in this dynamic SQL series. So every video I'm trying to explain different examples so that you will get more understanding, more knowledge in the dynamic SQL. Okay, let's start. Go to the SQL Server Management Studio. There we can understand the demo. So for today's demo purpose, I'm using the table employee table. Let's try to understand what data it contains, what are the columns it has. Let's try to execute it. So now you can see that there are 286 records are there and these number of columns available. Okay, so in this example, I'm trying to do the parameterized dynamic SQL. We'll try to see these examples in this video. Okay, execute sp underscore execute SQL. So directly I'm writing the query while in this parameterized way. Let's try to understand. Select from table employee. Here I'm taking only few columns. Instead of taking all the columns, I would like to take only few columns. Employee ID, manager ID, birth date, title, gender, marital status. So these are the columns I'm taking from the employee table. Now we need to pass the parameterized dynamic SQL. So let's try to add those also. Where manager ID equal to manager ID and gender equal to @gender. So we haven't declared these parameters. We'll do that very soon. So just end comma. Now I'm declaring the parameterized dynamic SQL parameters. Manager ID integer comma gender varchar 100. Now we need to pass the values for these parameters. Manager ID equal to 3, gender equal to m. Now let's try to execute and we'll see whether it will give error or we will get data or not. We'll try to see. So but the date, I think some column names are wrong. I have given date. Okay, marital status. Let me check what column it contains. So every time I'm typing wrong column names. Table employee, execute it. So copy the column name, take it, matter status. Now let's try to execute. We'll get output or not. Yeah, it's working fine. So this is the parameterized dynamic SQL. So we are declaring parameters, manager ID, gender. We are defining the definition for those parameters, and finally we are giving the values. So here I am declaring the parameters, and finally we are defining the definition. I mean, what kind of data type? This is integer, this is varchar, and finally we are passing the values to these parameters. So if we execute, it will work. Even if we give the female also, it will work. Now it's working fine, right? We'll try to see different way of declaring parameters. Declare so here I'm storing the dynamic SQL in a variable. So I'm defining that variable SQL string and varchar max, and also I'm storing the parameters in a different variable. Let's try to declare that variable also. Declare parameter definition and varchar 1000. Now I'm setting the dynamic SQL for this SQL string variable equal to. So try to take all these columns. What are the columns I specified? Same columns only I'm using. I'm not using any different columns. Where manager id equal to manager id and gender equal to gender. So I have written the dynamic SQL and finally setting to this variable. Now I am defining the parameter definition. Set parameter definition equal to manager id manager id integer gender varchar 100. Even I have given the dynamic SQL into this variable and finally defining this parameter definition into this variable and finally calling this dynamic SQL execute sp underscore execute SQL. So we need to call this dynamic SQL and parameter definition and setting the values. Manager id equal to 3, manager id equal to 3 and gender equal to male. Now let's try to execute whether it will work or not. We'll try to see. Try to execute it. Must declare variable. What is that? Oh, I have given 2 at the rates. Yeah, it's working fine. See, so what are the here in this query we are declaring the parameters definition also at the dynamic SQL itself, but here we are separately defining the parameter definition into this variable. So same variable I'm calling while executing the dynamic SQL. Okay, even it's working fine. Even if we execute both also we will get. So the difference is if I given the f means even if you give the f means it will work. Yeah, so both are giving the same output only. There is no difference. We can write this way or we can write this way also. So same thing it will work. Now what I'm gonna do here is I'll try to write a procedure and place what are the code I have written. This one I will place into the procedure and we are calling from the procedure and we'll try to understand whether it will work or not. So here we are seeing different examples. Create procedure, get param dynamic SQL. So here we need to declare 2 parameters because so far we are taking manager ID and gender. So define the 2 parameters. One is manager ID integer and another one is gender varchar as begin end. So within this block we need to define the what are the code we have written here. So I'll try to take it, copy and paste it here instead of writing every time so that we can save some time also. So here what we have to do, we need to take these parameters instead of passing the values hard coded. Okay, so take these parameters and map into the parameter definition. Now we need to set end. Yeah, end is yes. So we'll try to print this, print SQL string. Okay, let's try to execute it. So procedure complete successfully. Now we'll try to pass the values and we'll see whether it will work or not. Execute sp. So main is ready 3 and gender is male. So let's try to execute it, whether it will work or not. So it's working like anything, it's working fine, right? Even you give the f also, so it's working fine. Even same query we are writing 3 ways, right? Same query we are writing 3 ways. See, in this place we are not defining the parameter definition outside of this dynamic SQL, but here we are declaring the parameter definition into the variable, and finally we are calling this variable into this dynamic SQL. Okay, while calling the dynamic SQL we are declaring this variable, we are setting the definition here. But when it comes to procedure, we are taking these parameters and finally calling these parameters into this param definition variables, right? So we can write these many ways dynamic SQL. So I will try to execute 3 at once so that you will get more understanding whether it's working fine or not. Just click on execute. Now we can see that all 3 are giving same output only, there is no difference at all. So these are the advantages of using dynamic SQL. I hope you like this video. In the next example I'll try to come up with a different topic. So thank you for so much for watching the channel. So please subscribe. Thank you.